Japan is among the countries with the most outbound FDI, in some instances even more than the superpowers like the US and China. A significant chunk of Japan's FDI makes its way to developed North America and Europe in various sectors. However, one key region for Japan's investment strategy is not so developed Asia. Some of the biggest beneficiaries of Japanese loans are Asian countries. For some reason, the country that invests so much abroad fails to get any significant FDI for itself. In fact, it's the second worst foreign investment receiver in the world, right next to North Korea. So what's the deal? Why is Japan investing so much in Asian countries while globally no one seems to be investing back in Japan? Stay tuned to the very end as we try to answer these questions. And if you're new to the channel, consider subscribing so you don't miss any videos like this. So, why is Japan investing so much in Asia? For decades, Japan has been investing heavily in various Asian countries, from the superpower China to the economically struggling Myanmar. China is Japan's largest trading partner and one of the largest investment destinations for Japanese companies. There's a long history of Japan's investments in China. The country has even rivaled South Korea over trade with the Red Dragon. The common danger presented by China's economic change, however, is currently overshadowing these disputes. As such, we've seen a shift in Japan's investment from China to other parts of Asia, specifically South Asia and the ASEAN bloc. Among these South Asian nations, India is the biggest receiver of FDI from Japanese companies as well as government loans. Japan's Official Development Assistance (ODA) program has played a key role in developing India's infrastructure through affordable loans and grants. The two countries now enjoy a very stable and healthy relationship, especially after India's economic crisis in the 1990s when Japan helped the country immensely. In the time after, several commercial ties were formed between the two nations. Among the most significant occurred in 2014, when the two nations formed one of the world's most robust economic alliances. The Japan-India Special Strategic and Global Partnership aims to double Japanese FDI into India every 5 years. And one of the most active areas to get this FDI is India's tech industry. In actuality, Technopro, a Japanese company, recently acquired the Indian app development studio Robosoft for $108 million. Apart from that, Japan has heavily invested in India's finance industry and even acquired 74.9% of Fullerton India, a company that knows the Indian market well, for $2 billion. Not only that, but Japan has also invested about $9.2 billion in Indian startups as of May 2021. One interesting fact is that most of the Japanese companies in India want to keep expanding their operations, a sign that the country is seen as profitable or has future potential. However, recently one of Japan's most strategic investment destinations has been the ASEAN bloc. To understand Japan's heavy investments in ASEAN countries, let's first understand the relationship between the two. Japan was one of the first ASEAN dialogue partners in 1977, marking the beginning of the official relationship between the two, even though the ASEAN bloc didn't hold much strategic importance for Japan at the time. It wasn't until the mid-1980s that the economic potential of ASEAN began to shine. This prompted numerous Japanese companies to actively expand their operations in ASEAN states. A lot of people think that it wasn't a good thing for the ASEAN nations, especially after Japan's invasions during World War II, as they saw Japan's entry as a means to control the area. However, this wasn't the case. As a result of Japan's persistent efforts to aid the Southeast Asian bloc, perspectives about the country began to change in the early 1990s. This became even more apparent during the East Asian economic crisis of 1997. Japan, already a major economic force, felt pressured to bail out its fellow Asian nations when their currencies and economies took a nosedive. To mitigate economic harm and reduce reliance on the International Monetary Fund, it prompted the creation of the Chiang Mai Initiative, a currency swap agreement spanning East and Southeast Asia. For the Japan-ASEAN economic relationship to foster growth and community building, then Prime Minister Koizumi Junichiro had already made the request by 2002. This, along with other Japanese policies and initiatives, altered ASEAN's perception of Japan and the economic situation in the 10 member states, further deepening the relationship between the two. And to further back this change into perspective, Japan has invested heavily in the ASEAN countries. Since 2002, Japan has invested nearly twice as much in ASEAN nations as it has in China, making it the biggest East Asian investment destination for the Japanese government. Although ASEAN only accounts for 3.6% of the global economy, it is home to 30% of all Japanese overseas subsidiaries. Japanese capital investment in ASEAN is far greater than the region's economic clout would suggest. For Japan, ASEAN is the second largest source of investment income after the United States, contributing to Japan's current account surplus. The shared education between the two groups has fostered understanding and respect for each other's cultures, languages, religions, and beliefs, and has strengthened their cooperation. Consequently, the bilateral relationship between Japan and ASEAN has continually grown stronger over the years. And since then, the bilateral connection between Japan and ASEAN has not only endured, but also strengthened with each passing year. But is that all the reason why Japan's investing so much in these nations? Is it just to foster cultural understanding and preserve historical connections? Well, to understand that, we must take a closer look into the industries getting the most funding from Japan. According to the ASEAN Secretariat, Japan invested the most in the finance and manufacturing sectors of the region. Since Singapore is a major global financial center, it stands to reason that it would be in charge of the first, finance. Additionally, we believe that the insurance and lending industries in finance are strategically valuable. On the other hand, as an export sector, Japan's automotive industry makes up a major portion of the country's revenue, and the finance serves as a means to supplement and make these vehicles affordable for the people in ASEAN. With still low costs, the growth of the bloc's manufacturing economy is crucial for countries like Japan and the rest of the globe. Perhaps this explains why machinery and equipment make up the bulk of Japan's exports. They help set up production facilities and keep productivity high. There is much more to Japan's standing as an investment source than just the sheer volume and purpose of its investments. However, Japan will remain one of ASEAN's most valuable allies, and this much is certain. Now, many people consider all of these investments to be sincere acts of kindness, but it is worrying that no one is willing to invest in Japan despite the fact that it's investing so much abroad. Well, to say no one wants to invest in the country is stretching it a little. But still, according to the UNO, Japan received the worst amount of FDI relative to its GDP, second only to North Korea. On the other hand, the total inward FDI stock as a percentage of GDP is 4 to 5% for Japan. And just to give you a sense, the average for OECD nations is 40 to 50%. However, in 2021, the government set a goal to promote the inward foreign direct investment stocks to 80 trillion yen by 2030 and reach 12% of GDP. And it is working, as in 2023 we see a 32% jump in the FDI compared to last year, making Japan the 13th largest recipient worldwide in absolute terms. Typically, nations that aim to increase their GDP would court international businesses to set up shop in their country, build new facilities like offices or factories, acquire local competitors, or put money into their public or private bonds. Nonetheless, Japan is an exception, since the country is still struggling to get FDI and the recent investment increase is not stable. So, is it illegal to put money into Japan in the hopes of making a profit? Absolutely not. Japan is the land of high tech, and globally 50% of the components in anything manufactured in high tech come from Japan. Companies see the biggest benefit of investing in Japan not in affordable labor or favorable business conditions, but in the nation's capability in high tech. Recently, the biggest semiconductor company in the world, TSMC, has been expanding its production facilities from Taiwan to Japan. Well, it's also because of fear of China invading Japan. Let us know in the comments if you want us to explore this topic further. But the question is, why can't Japan attract investments in traditional sectors apart from high tech? Well, let me explain. Up to 80% of FDI in a developed nation comes from mergers and acquisitions, but Japan is an exception to that rule. This is partially because of the restrictions the country imposed after World War II to stop multinational companies from controlling the Japanese market. Years later, when Japan's government was compelled to remove these restrictions by the OECD, Japanese lawmakers came up with a way to counteract this by making it harder for foreign corporations to acquire Japanese businesses. And so the keiretsu system was formed, along with the promotion of cross-shareholdings amongst enterprises. For instance, the Toyota Group is very interconnected with its 1,000 companies and 40,000 suppliers. In other words, those companies don't function independently, making them harder to acquire. As a result, the country that used to be decades ahead of the world in electronics and technology is well behind other countries in the digital revolution. Not to mention, the government actively makes it harder for multinational companies to acquire Japanese corporations. Just in 2020, the criterion for a corporate transaction requiring government permission decreased from 10% of the shares to around 1%. That explains why the country receives so little foreign direct investment, but is among the top 3 countries having the most outbound FDI. So why is a country that doesn't get that much FDI investing so much in other countries? Well, the answers lie within Japan itself. As far back as anyone can remember, Japan has been at the forefront of technological development. But these days, Japan is facing a serious problem. There's been a huge decline in the country's labor force as a result of its rapidly aging population, and it will have everlasting effects on Japan's economy, and the government knows that. According to some estimates, over a quarter of the population is 65 years old or older. In contrast, the nations Japan is investing in are very different. There's an abundance of young people there. For example, just in Indonesia, about 28% of the population is between 10 and 24 years old. Speaking of 28, that's India's average age, according to a UN report in 2020, putting both countries among the world's youngest populations. So to counter the decline in Japan's workforce, Japan has used its strategic investments to fill this gap. Thanks to acquisitions of foreign companies and opening outlets of Japanese companies in other countries, Japan has been able to get more and more youth in its workforce, even if it's not on its land. On the other hand, a 2017 study stated that Japan's involvement in foreign countries is a politico-strategic utility, meaning that the country is using its investments as a means to gain influence on the continent. One reason for such endeavors is to fight against its lost decades, a period of stagnant economic development from 1991 to 2021. But what do you think? Are Japan's investments a form of control, or does the country just want to create stable relationships with other nations? Let us know in the comments below.